So, this marks the first time I've actually finished a Mega Man blind run, or at least one that I managed to publish. I have to say it went better than I expected, even if I did run into some problems along the way. It helps that Mega Man Rock'n'Roll is honestly a really good game. This is easily the best Mega Man fan game I've played, though time will tell if Mega Man X Corrupted ends up taking that spot. The levels were, for the most part, well designed, and the bosses were challenging but generally felt fair and learnable. Notably, there seems to be very little RNG in this game, at least in respect to what you can deal with and what you can't. There wasn't really a time where I thought, I hope the boss doesn't use that one pattern that's 10 times harder to dodge than the others. The soundtrack is pretty good. I think most Mega Man fan games usually do a pretty good job with the music, but this is probably still on the upper end. My favorites are the Power Supply stage and Ghost Woman stage, though the Robot Factory, Drake Man, and Dune Woman are up there as well. The graphics were decent for the style, though it seems like they didn't bother trying to make them conform to NES limitations. It's really noticeable at the beginning of Drake Man's stage in Any with Water, where the background couldn't normally scroll like that, at least not without taking up an inordinate amount of character ROM. It's kinda hard to say what my favorite boss fight was. Maybe Tide Man or Drake Man, I guess? Favorite stage is equally hard, but I'm inclined to say Dune Woman or Ghost Woman for that, maybe. My favorite Robot Master design is definitely Beetle Lady, though, and her stage and battle aren't half bad either. On that note, I wish that we'd gotten to see full-size character portraits of all the Robot Masters, similar to what Mega Man 9 and Mega Man Rock Force did. I imagine there's probably fan art of them, but I actually looked and couldn't find any. I was almost worried that the Robot Masters wouldn't show up at all during the ending cutscenes, but fortunately that wasn't true. Some dialogue could have also been nice to show their personalities and all, though the creator, for whatever reason, decided not to include any of that in any of the cutscenes besides the intro, and they actually turned out surprisingly effective in spite of that. Also, getting to play as Mega Man, Roll, or even both in the same stage, that was cool. I'm actually surprised there aren't more fan games that have Roll as a playable character. She was created at the same time as Mega Man and Proto Man, she was playable in Mega Man Powered Up, and she was almost as important a character as Mega Man was in the cartoon. Not that too many people probably watched that. I do have a few complaints with the game, though. For one, it seemed like it wasn't very transparent with some things. I get that the creator was trying to go for show don't tell, but to pull that off, you still have to be clear about what you're showing. It took me way too long to realize that only Mega Man can use Rush and only Roll can use Beat. Yes, I realized that the cutscenes for getting them only showed one character, but I didn't connect the dots at the time. It might be obvious if you're playing as both characters about equally, but if you're only using one of them, not so much. The game also never tells you anywhere that Roll takes more damage than Mega Man. Again, it would be easier to notice if you were using both characters a lot. If you're only playing as Roll for most of the game, as I was, it's easy to overlook and just assume that everything deals a lot of damage, at least until you get to the endgame and have to use both characters. Of course, it doesn't help that some things genuinely do just do a lot of damage. We'll get to those more in a bit. I suppose I could mention that it never tells you what the allies are for either, but that's probably not too hard to figure out since you go right by Drake Man's and Reactor Man's side paths, and if you check those out you can easily infer how the rest of them will work. It's also not really all that evident how you damage Wily's first form, if you couldn't tell from my struggles last time. Obviously I did figure it out eventually, but only after looking over the video afterward. When playing it, I didn't even notice the eyes opening up. How much of that is on me, I'm not sure, but it's certainly not helped any by how many shots it takes to open them all the way, and how fast they close once you do get them open, seriously. As for the level design, well, every Mega Man game has at least one stage or boss, or both, that's just not that fun, and this is no exception. Not counting the final stage since that's basically just a boss battle, I think the three weakest stages in the game are Proto Man's Escape, Roll's second Fortress stage, and Reactor Man's stage. Proto Man's stage, there's just no getting around it. It just wasn't all that great if you ask me. Proto Man's abilities just seem like a huge downgrade from Mega Man and Roll's. The only thing he has going for him is his shield, which is rarely worth the setup, but he can only have 2 shots on screen at once and he takes even more damage than Roll does. His stage doesn't really even have any interesting gimmicks. The only unique thing about it is those Mega Man 7 style spinning platforms, which are not enough in themselves, and a lot of the level and enemy design was straight up ripped from Mega Man 1. Then there's the boss. Ooh boy, the boss. This stage was the only time during this entire LP when I got flat out angry at this game, and the boss was a big reason for that. It is very pattern-based, so if you know exactly how to read the tells, you can pretty much do the fight without ever getting hit. But getting to that level of practice? This boss can kill you ridiculously fast because it jumps around a lot, Proto Man has no defense, and contact damage in this game can already be pretty high. If it runs into you or you run into it, you're taking 9 freaking damage. Also, it has 3 forms and 3 health bars, which is tied with Wily as the most in the game, so you have to survive for quite a while too. And if you die, well, the level is not exactly short, and the 1-ups are risky to get. I'm pretty sure I've said before that secret unlockable levels in games should be a reward, but most developers are really bad at actually making them feel rewarding, and I think that applies here. It's a requirement for getting the best ending too. The research lab stage is a more interesting level with a lot of unique gimmicks, but it's still grueling to get through. Here, it's definitely the stage that's the problem rather than the boss. The stage is super long, which might be okay if it weren't so punishing. Though they're not the only thing, there are a lot of instant death hazards here. I know that there have been levels based primarily around instant death hazards before, even in official games. Quickman stage is a perfect example. But firstly, is anyone at all pointing to Quickman stage as an example of good design or what a Mega Man level should be like? Secondly, Quickman stage is short. If you die late in that stage, you can get back there pretty well quickly. This one, on the other hand, takes forever to get through. For multiple reasons even, besides just the flat-out length. You have the Yoku blocks, the enemies that you have to wait for, the mini-devils being way too tanky. I do think that this stage had some interesting ideas. It's far from the worst Mega Man level, or even the worst Mega Man Fortress level that I've ever played, but it was just too much of a gauntlet for me to enjoy it all that much. Reactor Man stage, again, depends too much on instant death hazards. It was more creative with them than Force Beam stages in official Mega Man games, with things like the disco balls and buttons, but I still don't really think they needed to be instant death. The ones in Mega Man Super Fighting Robot just drained your health rapidly instead of outright killing you, and I think that would have been fine here. Heck, now that I think about it, the moving force beams remind me a bit of the electric beams from Fuse Man stage in Mega Man 11. Those didn't kill you either, but you still didn't want to get hit by them. The stage also seems to have a fair bit of waiting around for the beams to be in the right position, too, and a lot of stuff flying across the screen at you. Reactor Man himself is fast and powerful. He seems learnable, but I didn't quite manage to do so this time. His charge laser comes out quickly and it hurts if it hits. Actually, it seems like there are quite a few things in this game that hit like a truck, especially if you're playing as anyone but Mega Man, and I can't say I'm a fan of that. Also, why isn't the title Mega Man Rock and Roll? It's not even rock and roll with apostrophes, it's just Mega Man Rock and Roll. Still though, I do feel like many of the problems I had with this game were because it was a blind run. I learned enough in the process that I feel like I could do much better on a second playthrough. Even Proto Man stage, which gave me so much trouble, when I had to replay it to update my save files, I beat it on my second try, boss included. Like I said, it helps that this game is overall pretty well designed. I enjoyed playing through it, highly recommend it, and I think that's about all I have to say about it. See you next project!